And now we're streaming, so we should be able to go ahead and start.
Okay, let's start. Okay, I'd like to call to order the board of directors meeting for Central Oregon Community College for April 13th, 2022. And actually, this is the first in-person sort of board meeting that we've had in 2 years. Isn't that right, Erica? And so could you let's see, I need to do the native land acknowledgement. Central Oregon Community College would like to acknowledge that the beautiful land on our campuses reside on are the original homelands of the Wasco and Warm Springs people. They ceded this land to the United States government in the Treaty of 1855. The Paiute people were forcibly moved to the Warm Springs Indian Reservation starting in 1879. It is also important to note that the Klamath Trail ran through this region to the Great Celilo Falls trading grounds, and the Klamath tribes claim it as their own. Descendants of these original people are thriving members of our communities today, and we acknowledge and thank the original stewards of this land. So with that, could you do a roll call?
You got Alan Unger,
Here.
Laura Kraskin Cooper, Laura, can you hear me, Laura?
Sorry, I am here. I'm having technical challenges, but yes, I can hear you now.
Great, thanks, Laura. Erica Scattle,
Here.
Jim Clinton,
Here.
Oliver Tatum,
Here.
Joe Kernowitz, Joe, are you here?
I don't see him on the screen. Oh, okay. Well, we'll count him present when we see him.
Sounds good. Bruce Abernathy,
Here.
Dr. Harry Hamilton, Harry, are you here? I see you, or at least I see your name.
It's twice.
You can count him twice. We go on. Roger Detweiler,
Here.
Richard Hurd,
Here.
Jasmine Barnett. Haven't seen.
She's not here.
Lori Chesley,
Here.
Betsy Julian,
She's not here.
Zach Boone,
Present.
Laura Boney.
Here.
Alicia Moore.
Here.
Kathleen Knudsen.
Here.
Jeff Floyd.
Here.
Scott Burge.
Here.
And Amy Metcalf is present. So that's our roll call, but we should.
Introduce the rest of the people in the room, just by name. Or
Mark Reinecke.
I think we might have forgotten to put Mark on the list. I apologize.
We're glad you're here, Mark.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sure. I'm Melissa Heiss, and this year I have the privilege of
Oh, I
being,
know this must be just the introduction.
oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, okay, just come here right now.
I'm Melissa Heiss.
And then just come sit at the table because you're next.
All right.
Would you all mind just introducing yourself?
I'm Jasmine Yates, Amy Howell.
Great. Okay. Well, next on the agenda is the president's report, the introduction of the All Oregon Academic Team. President Chesley.
Well, they are here and ready. Alicia, you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, each year, all of Oregon's community colleges nominate between 2 to 4 students for the All Oregon Academic Team Award. And what that does is recognize students for not only their academic achievement, but their commitment to their studies and commitment to their communities. And so they honored at a banquet that this year is on Friday. and different processes throughout the year. So we're excited for them. They do get a scholarship and they're choosing to transfer next year. And each year we'd love to have them come to the budget and board meeting so we can all remember that students are the core of our mission. And so I'm thrilled to have them with us tonight. And Melissa Heiss is our financial aid advisor who can help coordinate the process this year. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa.
Yeah, so we had 3 awardees this year. One of the students wasn't able to make it tonight, but I would love to share some information about her so you guys can know a little bit about her. She was nominated by Stacy Donahue, who is the chair of the Humanities Department. And Stacy wrote a statement that she wanted me to share. In her nomination statement, she said, China works full-time, has a 3.87 GPA, and will complete her degree in winter term. She plans to transfer to a university to get a communications degree focused on public relations. As a student in one of my online writing 122 classes, her writing was always excellent and on time. I used several of her assignments as models. Her final research essay on bias in the media was superb and timely, and in a group, China quietly took the lead, always encouraging everyone to participate. And what's interesting is tonight, China was not able to attend because she is doing a marketing photo shoot campaign tonight, and she is the project manager for that. So she did graduate and she's moved out of town and already putting her degree to good use. China then also responded, she was sorry she couldn't be here tonight, but she wrote a statement that she would like for me to share with you as well. And she said, it has been an incredible journey. I am extremely grateful for the opportunities I now have because of all I've learned the last couple of years. I was never a strong student and I never thought I would attend college. At COCC, things began to take focus for me. When I started my first term at COCC, I was nervous and afraid that I had committed myself to a task that I was never going to be able to achieve, and I was doomed to fail. Since that first term, I believe I have grown more as a person than I ever would have imagined. From the moment I walked through the doors of my first communication class at the Bend campus, my life has forever changed for the better. So that was something she wanted me to share. Now I would like to introduce you to Amy Howell. We'll take it from here.
Great, thank you. I'm Amy Howell. Nice to see all of you, and thanks for being here. I didn't realize this was the first time in person, so this feels extra
2
special.
years or more.
Yeah, well, you know, it's great. So I have been a faculty member here for 18 years, which is strange to say, and those of you with a background in education will appreciate this, but every once in a while, a student comes along that reminds you of the why that got you into this space in the first place. And consistently, that has been Jasmine for me for the past couple of years. And Jasmine is the type of student in early childhood education who goes above and beyond every single time. So much so that she's sort of my go-to person to check through my assignments, make sure that they're clear and coherent. She's always the first to let me know, this is a little confusing, this link doesn't work. So I rely on Jasmine in so many ways. But Jasmine is already a rising and strong leader in early childhood education. She works with High Desert ESD with early childhood special education and is known by her colleagues as being a stable, strong, consistently professional person. And it is a true honor to get to work and learn with you, Jasmine.
You want to say a few words, Jasmine?
My name is Jasmine, and I'm currently pursuing my early childhood associate's degree here, as well as, thanks to Amy, 3 early childhood certificates and my general associates. I will be done in 2 terms after spring, so after winter of next year. I came to COCC because it's close to home. I have an 8-year-old brother at home, and I couldn't imagine ever leaving him, so it kept me here. And since being here, I have been able to connect with so many amazing professors that at one point I actually stopped. I decided to not do college anymore, but Amy brought me back, and I'm here, and I'm so glad to be back, and I'm excited to be done. But as we talked about earlier, I probably won't be done, and I'll just keep adding more.
It's my turn. And this is my first time to a board meeting, and I'm so privileged and honored that I get to introduce these students. Alan Nunes nominated Quinn Crow. And he was unable to make it tonight, so he also went pass along something he wanted me to read, so she knew how proud he was of her and her accomplishments. And so Alan Nunes, who is the instructor for the massage therapy program, said over the course of this student's time at CCC, she has demonstrated a commitment to her decision to attend college that has not gone unnoticed. Since enrolling and starting her declared major in the fall of 2020, she has demonstrated enthusiasm for her education and held a high regard for both students and instructors. Despite having a long commute for the last 2 years, this student has maintained near perfect attendance and academic excellence, taking on up to 16 credits in a term. She has completed her certificate of completion and is due to complete her Associates of Applied Science this June. She is very passionate about her new career path, and she has been a delight to have in the classroom. Her drive to be successful motivates classmates, and she displays a natural gift for working with others. Her joyful personality can light up a room, and it is with no doubt we all know that she will go on to be a wonderful addition to the world of health and wellness. And he was sending a big congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm Quinn. I've been going to school here for massage therapy. I should be done this June on my associates. That's super fun. I just need to take my big test to get licensed, which I'm super excited about. I chose COCC because I knew that I wanted to go to college to get my licensing, so I could get the credit, as well as the fact that it would be like a more accredited program, more put together probably. And I just kind of saw that it was an associate's degree. And so I thought that that like kind of showed that you guys like really cared about wanting us to learn instead of just to get us licensed. Because associates isn't required. The licensing is like is kind of the minimum and like the standard. But the fact that COCC offers the associates kind of shows that you guys are here to help us learn and help us for ourselves. And so that really like I was drawn to that. I also kind of went to high school in Central Oregon, and so I really love it here. And the fact that it was near to home was like really good and very appealing. And my time here at CCC has been nothing but amazing. All of my instructors have been awesome. I love them all. They've been so helpful, so kind. Like they really are here for us, and I just love that. You can tell that what they do every day is something that they enjoy, and that they aren't just doing it for like the money or the fact that they have to have a job. They like want to do it, and they really care about each and every one of us. So I love that. I love the variety of things that we've learned. They've given us options, and we've been given like kind of like an assortment of things we can learn, and we just like they really prepared us for like our career, and I love that. It's really just been an awesome time here. I'm so thankful for every moment.
Well, we want to thank you for being here and being who you are. Like Amy Howell said, having outstanding students fills our tank so that we can be those strong instructors like you just mentioned. So, you know, we're proud of you, and we're thankful that you're taking and making the most out of your education. And education is a lifelong learning thing. So you aren't going to stop, I'm sure, because if you're motivated now, you'll just keep being motivated. So thank you for what you do, and good luck to your future.
Yeah, thank you for speaking with us, and good luck.
Yeah, and you guys on Zoom, you're just going to have to interrupt because I can't see you that well, and you just have to do like Erica did.
I think we can all handle it. We can.
Thanks.
You heard from Sugar.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, are there any changes to the agenda? Is there a public comment? Amy?
We didn't receive any written comments, no.
Great. Well, at this time, we will adjourn from regular session and adjourn as the budget committee. And we will start our budget process for the 22-23 year. So I'll look to our budget officer, President Chesley, to start that process.
So everybody can follow along in their packets. There is a packet for the budget committee. So everything's right in order from the very start of the meeting through, and that includes the budget committee. And the first thing that I wanted to make sure that I did is explain why we have only 3 budget members here this evening. And I think it's important to note this. And we are so grateful for them, Richard, Roger, and Harry. We had some folks resign from the budget committee, as happens, and we posted for openings for people who wanted to apply to become part of the committee. And we actually had no one apply. So we checked with the Oregon Community College Association counsel, and she assured us that as long as we've made the good faith effort, we can proceed and we'll be fine. And so what I would propose is that we're going to post again in the fall, and maybe be even more aggressive in our advertising and our recruitment, and get out and think of some folks to invite to apply. And then also Jasmine Barnett let me know recently that she has moved and she's now actually in another zone. And that zone does have a budget member. And so we'll not only be looking for 3, but for 4. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that before we started. And then it's Alan, I'll let you go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So we appoint a chair to the budget committee who runs the budget committee meetings. And generally we look to the private members to chair the budget committee. It seems like that's sort of a tradition. I'm looking at Roger being here to make it sort of facilitate this whole process a little bit better. So can I nominate? You want to
Why not?
nominate someone for chair for the budget?
I guess my first question is this something, would you be willing to serve as chair if nominated?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm happy to nominate Roger as chair.
I'll second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded that Roger be chair of budget committee. Roger heard. So is there, Roger Detweiler, excuse me. Is there any comment?
Other nominations?
Other nominations?
What's the salary?
The same as being a budget committee member. So with that, I'll close nominations. All those in favor of Roger being chair of the budget committee, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. Any objections? Great. So from this point on, Roger, you've got your agenda. Yeah. Okay. So we'll go next to the president's budget remarks, and then you'll carry it on from there.
All right,
Thanks.
Well, thanks. Before Kathleen gets into the numbers and the nitty gritty, did she disappear? Oh, thank God. Okay. We're going to be in trouble if you're not here. You can't leave this to me. Okay. Before we get into the presentation that you all have become accustomed to, very similar to what you've become accustomed to, I wanted to just say a few things from my point of view, kind of high level priorities that we had for this budget, for next year's budget. How the process that we use to come up with next year's budget, and some broad considerations that are on the horizon in years beyond next year, that I think it's just important for you to know that we're looking at really carefully. And so again, mostly because we are still suffering some of the effects of COVID, essential spending was, of course, the #1 priority. And that really means things like insurance, contracts that we are part of and the like. So that, I guess that always comes first, not surprisingly. But after that, I made the #1 priority for this year to be implementing, to the extent that it was prudent, the findings of the wage study that we did for our classified staff. And so that was the priority, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The second priority was facilities infrastructure / deferred maintenance. We have a number of critical systems, HVAC and electric, that need to be replaced. And so that was also a priority. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Then finally, outreach to our district as a whole and workforce development. So the process we use in formulating the budget began last fall with departments being able to make requests for new funds, new positions, new supplies, anything that they might need. And that then goes to a committee that we have on campus called Fiat, just like the car. Financial, it's just Fiat. Okay, it's
Internal advisory team.
Financial Internal Advisory Team. And that's a cross-campus group that then takes all of the new requests and uses a rubric and prioritizes them. Then the SLT gets that list and we look at the priorities, and together, after much discussion, we make final decisions about what we're going to do that's new.
What's the SLT?
Pardon me?
SLT, what is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. The senior leadership team. It's these good folks here and Kathleen.
Okay, thanks.
So I will say that in the past couple of years, we've tended to get fewer requests than we have in the past. And I think that's because we've been, people have taken it very seriously that we're focused on essential spending and priorities. And with COVID and the uncertainty, we're not necessarily living in the land of plenty. So the requests actually were pretty modest. You may ask yourself, well, what happens with existing positions? Those come to SLT for discussion, and we look at those very, very carefully to decide, do we want to rehire the same position? Do we want to rehire? Or are we reallocating a position? And we're pretty frugal. We're very frugal about that. And we do sometimes decide not to hire. We sometimes decide we need to reallocate that to an area where frankly, a position is much more needed. And so you'll hear more about our staffing as well as we move on. I guess the thing to be assured of is that even though Dave Dona is retired and I'm sure he's somewhere beautiful and sunny, we're still a pretty frugal bunch here. It's in our blood. I would remind you, and Kathleen will give more details, that our funding sources are property taxes. In 2021, 35% of our budget came from property taxes. The second largest funding source is tuition and fees. In 2021, that was 18%. And state aid in the same year was 15%. We have also, as you will see in this presentation, benefited greatly from funds from the federal government that were allocated because of COVID. In total, we have received as a college $21.3 million, nearly half of which we have allocated to students, as was required. But nonetheless, it's important to know that that was direct aid to students. We were able to request an extension because the effects of COVID are not over. And so we requested an extension to spend those funds. And essentially, we rolled over $3 million that will be a part of next year's budget. So again, Kathleen will very capably dig into the details of this, but I also just want to mention some things that we have on our minds here as we move forward. The first of those is enrollment. You are aware that our enrollment has been declining pretty steadily since the Great Recession. And it took an even more precipitous fall during COVID. That is a trend we need to be extremely cognizant of as we plan for the future. You are also aware that the better the economy is and the higher the employment rate is, the more likely we see decline in enrollment, because there are good paying jobs out there, pretty more widely available than they might normally be. And a lot of times the choices students make aren't between us and another college. They're between us and not coming to college and getting a job. So we're working against a trend there. During COVID, there was also a national trend that community colleges took a more significant hit in enrollment than four-year universities. And a lot of people have studied that, wondering why. And the folks who have done that posit that the reason is we tend to serve much more vulnerable students than most four-year universities. We have all ages, all family situations, all levels of ability, and folks with complex lives. And COVID really became for them the straw that broke the camel's back. School was the thing they couldn't do anymore once their life became that much more complicated. And it was the thing that they could give up when they had to choose between care for an elderly parent or a child, staying home to homeschool, and things like that. We do think we might be seeing a better trend in enrollment. This term, spring term, we are about even with spring term last year. Alicia, do you want to say anything more about that and what you're looking at in that regard?
Yeah, nationally, Lori mentioned this, nationally community colleges were on a downward, very steep downward trend. And COCC in Oregon was no exception to that during the last 2 years. But what we're seeing for the first time this spring is a leveling off of that. And as Lori mentioned, at least on the credit student population, we're in the same place, shy, maybe like 2 students above as we were where we were last spring, which represents a substantial change for the last 2 years. And then what we're starting to see towards fall is an increased number of financial aid applications, admissions applications, student inquiries, student tours, all of those things that are positive indicators towards a different trend than what we've experienced in recent years. So very positive outlook.
So we're hopeful, but you will see in this presentation that we're still being very conservative in our estimate of what enrollment will be next year. And we think that's the most prudent thing to do. We also need to be aware as we look to the future of the fact that sometimes the state likes to give us unfunded mandates. And that's enough said about that topic. We do have $8 million that have been allocated from the state for a building on our Redmond campus, for which we need to match the 8 million. And that is a plan yet to be developed, but that looms in the future. That has been renewed for the next biennium. So it's definitely something we keep in mind. We are considering very strongly in the early stages of planning for another facility in Madras. We have been fortunate to have been gifted by the Bean Foundation in Madras lands for developing a new building. And Zach and his team are working on the plans for that and the funding for that, which we believe at this point we can do with private dollars. Deferred maintenance, despite the fact that we're making some significant investments for the coming year, there's still a lot to be done. It's a big concern of ours. On another note, are we in year 6 of our disagreement with the Veterans
Coming
Administration.
up on our 6-year anniversary.
The Veterans Administration and the college are disagreeing about the dispersion of funds to students. And we are currently in a legal process with them. And that cost, what they have said we owe is $3 million. We strongly dispute that we owe that and are vigorously carrying through with our defense. On a good note, our ventures with William Smith Properties are starting to pay off greatly, and the forecast is looking good for the future. We are another entity, but we have sold land on which houses are being built off Shevlin Park Road, and we are receiving proceeds from that. We are soon entering into some agreements with a company to construct some apartments for, they call it senior living, but it's only 55 and older. So I'm sure that's not what it really is. And so we've seen from the proceeds of the sales of homes in recent months, $500,000 in revenue, which we are, as the board and the college decide what to spend that on and invest it on, we are putting that away in a nice fund where it is gathering interest until we decide what to do with it. And that real estate was always really intended as a long-term investment for the college. It should not. And I don't think this board would ever agree, may I speak for you, agree that it's operational funding or any such thing. It's strategic and long-term. And so there's a lot of irons in the fire for the future. I wanted to make you aware of a few of them before we start this discussion. And if, Mr. Chairperson, if you're ready, we can continue and we'll bring Kathleen up.
We'll see.
All right, I'm not quite sure where to stand, but.
Well, we don't need to see you because we'll be looking at the board.
Okay, great. Great job, Lauren. For those of you who don't know me, Catherine Newton, I'm the director of Fiscal Services. This is my first in-person board meeting, so
What's
it's
your
nice,
title again?
nice to meet Kathleen.
And your title?
Oh, Director of Fiscal Services.
Okay, thank you.
I have about 10 years of experience in higher ed and about 20 in not-for-profit accounting. Today's budget presentation, we're just going to be talking about the general fund. Lori mentioned a few items that are non-general fund related, and we'll get into that in the May board meeting. So I'll give a fiscal 22 status update. I'll look at some trends and assumptions for enrollment. We'll review the tuition and fee proposal for the 22-23 academic year. I'll give a breakout of imposed taxes, as well as attempt to provide a calculation of the current state funding formula. Additionally, I'll do an overview of what we've used our HERF dollars towards and give some fiscal 23 budget takeaways. This year's presentation is very similar in content to past years, although we've changed the order in some of the slides in hopes of it being a bit more logical, probably also a little shorter in length. And before I move on, I just want to thank my staff, specifically Adrian Sorrell, who helped with a ton of data input, as well as the other people in this room who made this a very collaborative effort. So just some basic definitions of the general fund. It's our college's primary operating fund. The primary objective is the precision of revenue and expense forecasting and tracking as a means of developing the operating budget within the context of a balanced operating position. Again, the non-general funds will be presented during the May board meeting. The purpose of budgeting the general fund is to identify financial trends like enrollment and property tax. It's to understand the long-term effects of budget decisions like tuition and salary costs, It's required by the board, and it's also recommended by bond rating agencies such as S&P. And I should mention, feel free to interrupt with any questions, or we can cover those at the end of the presentation as well. So before looking at the 22-23 forecast, I wanted to give a status update of the current year. So just comparing, the budget column is what was proposed and approved a year ago. The projected column is kind of what we're seeing with 3/4 of activity, as well as what we expect to collect and earn in the fourth quarter. So the state aid line is actually coming in. Sorry, I'm just going to move the Zoom.
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't design the presentation with the Zoom box in mind. But yeah, so I'm sorry. Okay, our state aid line, we're projected to come in much higher. The state changed their biennial amount after the budget was proposed, so that's why that number is increased from our current budget. Property taxes are coming in, within 1%, which is very typical. Tuition and fees. Last year, or about a year ago, we budgeted a 4% increase in enrollment. Year to date, FT numbers were about 6% down. So that's why we're seeing about 10% budget to actuals in tuition and fees. The other line are transfers in. Because of some of the savings I'll discuss on the next slide, we decided we don't need to do such significant transfers in from our non-general funds, so we plan to reduce that in the current year. So looking at some of our estimated expenditures for the current year, we're down budget to actuals in salaries and payroll assessments. That's due to vacancies and open positions. Materials and services is below budget. This assumes the $800,000 operating contingency that is typically budgeted will not be spent on materials and services. I'll actually talk about that as a supplemental transfer out a few lines down. Additionally, our transfers out, we're going to reduce by $30,000. That was earmarked for, I believe it is unemployment reserve. We decided that we can use HERF dollars to cover that in our non-general fund, so it won't be coming from the general fund. And then the $800,000 supplemental transfer out, we decided to move that operating contingency amount to our repair and replacement non-general fund. As Lauren mentioned, we had significant HVAC issues in the current year. So instead of spending that on materials and supplies, we're going to move it to a non-general fund to cover some of those costs. Yeah.
Could you say what HERF means so everybody knows?
Yes. Oh yeah. So that's our COVID relief dollars, I believe, and it's on a slide. Higher education emergency relief funding.
Great.
And I'll go into a lot more detail on that.
Okay.
But yeah, we've and I'll just mention the guidance changed a little bit from when we were first awarded to where we currently are. But I'll get into a little more detail on the HERF funds. So just moving on to some estimates and trends for fiscal 23. Lori and Alicia mentioned this already. I wanted to present kind of a look back to 2006, 2007, kind of the most recent recession. Just to show, that's actually when we started increasing our enrollment from 2006 to 2012, which was kind of the peak in higher ed. I saw that, in community colleges to four-year universities, some of the biggest first-time in college classes. We've experienced enrollment decline in the past decade, but it's worth noting that we're still hovering kind of above that 2006, 2007 amount. And just looking at trends, including a fairly stable spring term, for our fiscal 23 forecast, we're going to propose a 4% enrollment decline. So we've used that as our estimate in looking at our fiscal 23 budget. So past year, like a year ago, we estimated 4% increase. Being a little more realistic, we're incorporating a 4% decrease. If it's a 4% increase, we'll be very pleased.
Well, and I would note that last year, we actually thought we were being realistic. Um, thinking, COVID would bring a lot of students back when a lifting of COVID, and that just didn't happen. And, COVID's still significantly with us.
All right, so the next slide, Lori, are you presenting our tuition proposal?
Oh, you're gonna present we agreed to this. I'm the words, you're the numbers.
Okay.
That's how this works. I wanted to speak a little bit to tuition philosophy before we get into the actual numbers. And we had a conversation at the board meeting in March a year ago. Maybe March, yeah, about how the college is currently philosophically looking at setting tuition, and had a chance to speak with the board about that and see if they endorse that position, and it seems you did. We think we're being consistent with that perspective that we have on tuition, and that perspective really is a steady and incremental approach. One that is keeps tuition as affordable as possible for students, and as predictable as possible. So what we try for is no big shifts. No big shifts, 10% up one year, 0 the next. That really doesn't spread responsibility for costs more broadly. That's not a perspective of every institution. Some are very, very hesitant to ever raise tuition, and sometimes the way that ends up is in a few years' time, you have to raise it a great deal. Some are, committed to raise it as much as is reasonably possible in any given year. So that's really the perspective that we take. And as we look to be as affordable and predictable and equitable as possible, we consider many, many factors. And what is the economy like? What is COVID like? What is the current CPI, CPI West? What's inflation doing, obviously? And we then we also look, frankly, at what other community colleges and other universities are doing as well, as much as they will share that information and as much as it's certain. And so a lot of factors go into how we figure tuition. And you'll note that I did mention the CPI West. Our proposed tuition increase is not even close. And I would never be sitting here advocating that. I think that would be wrong. I actually checked today, and since last year at this point in time, the CPI West has gone up a little bit less than 9%. So again, in the spirit of keeping things as affordable for students as we can, that was not something we would ever put forward, even though our costs are going up. So Kathleen, you take it away now.
Yeah, and I'll just mention that a formal resolution is in the new business version of the board meeting. So on the board agenda, it's just a little farther down, which is where the planning board votes on this proposal. Okay.
Can you go back to that slide?
Certainly.
Help me understand. I'm looking at the very bottom, the assumption, the dollar assumption change. Does that assume 16 credits? I'm trying to figure out what are the baseline assumptions under that?
Yeah, we use 36 credits, so 3 terms of around 12 credits.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, 12 credits is the minimum for full-time enrollment, and you'll see a lot of institutions use 15. But when we look at our data, most of our students are hovering around 12 or 13. So we want to be more realistic in calculating the annual cost to students.
So that's a per credit figure, is that what that means?
The top portion would be per credit.
Our fee structure is based on fee, per credit. And then the bottom portion would be, a full load, including the fees.
Again, but an average, right?
Average, yes, yep, so some students will, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to this slide. So this is a comparison of other Oregon community colleges tuition and fees. Blue represents tuition and orange is fees. The horizontal lines are per term. In the far column, annualized column, that would be 3 terms. So just wanted to point out that COCC is the 5th most affordable in the state. And our annualized number, and this example right here would be an in-district student. The 4617 is still below the state average of 4799. And then just in corresponding with some of the other community colleges and their business officers, most of them are proposing between a 2 and 5% increase in tuition and fees. Of course, their board still to vote on that.
Most of them, I won today, 7%.
Okay,
Yeah, so, but you're right.
Yeah,
The vast majority is. between 2
Yeah,
and 5.
yeah, I believe there was, I can't remember.
Well, they
which
just call
college.
that 2 plus 5. I mean,
There we go.
They made that. That's what they were thinking, I know.
Yeah, I believe there was one college, one of the business officers mentioned that they presented to the board and the board said, why aren't you raising it more? So they're following the trends as well. This slide represents COCC's revenue trends, primary revenue sources, which Lauren mentioned in her bit. So the blue is our property tax, the revenue from there. Orange represents tuition and fees, which kind of falls in line with our enrollment curve. And green represents our state aid. I'll go through a calculation on state aid in a couple more slides. This represents our 21-22 imposed property taxes by county. For our 22-23 forecast, we assume 5.6% property tax growth using a 5-year look back, historical look back. And also for 23, we exclude Lake County. Okay, so I'll give I'm trying to attempt is a broad overview of our state funding formula. Recalculating it made the most sense to me, so hopefully it does for you too. I wanted to go through the pieces. So the 347 million represents what the state has allocated for the biennium. The 218 represents property taxes for all the community colleges. Our total public resources is the 566 million. HEC determines, which is the higher ed group, they determine a base payment for each community college. That's usually between 1 and 1.3 million to meet some basic needs for community colleges. So the remaining portion that is distributed and is allocated on a weighted average FTE is the 546. So, which I will get into in the next slide.
I'll step just a second here and note that the state, the HEC, Higher Education Coordinating Commission, they are reviewing the CCSF, the Community College Support Fund, and how that's calculated. And the community college presidents said, hey, we need to be a little bit more of a part of this than you just coming in and kind of telling us what this is going to look like. And so HEC agreed to form a statewide committee with one representative from each community college, as well as some of their staff, their budget officers. We slowed down the process a little bit, so it'll happen this year and next. And again, we were able to get some input. Our representative to that team is Alicia Moore. And the presidents got together to be strategic about how we staffed that committee. There are a lot of, including Kathleen would have been great on that committee. We didn't want it to have entirely budget officers because we need to keep students at the center. So we've got some student voices there. We've got some president voices there. We've got some instructional voices there. And that'll be something, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. And Alicia, you noted that there's a video coming out about the CCSF.
Yeah, it's part of the introductory work. They did it was a quick half hour from someone from the Higher Education Coordinating Commission. It was probably the best explanation I've seen of the Community College Support Fund formula in a whole lot of years. And so I've got the PowerPoint. We're trying to track down the recording to be able to share with all of you because it's a very quick overview, but it lays it out in very easy to understand terms. And Kathleen will do some of that with our specific numbers tonight too. So we'll get that to you as soon as we can get our hands on it.
Yeah, so just as far as the calculation for COCC, kind of highlighted on the last slide, you know, the 347 is the state allocated amount for the biennium. The 218 represents property taxes for all colleges. We subtract 20 million as the, you know, everyone gets their base payment. So the 546 is what is allocated based on the weighted average FTE. So COCC is the yellow highlighted line. Our weighted average FTE is the 3742 divided by the 67508, it's approximately 5.5%. That is multiplied by the 546. So COCC's allocation without the base is 30 million. However, our property tax makes up 70% of our allocation. So if you compare Central's line to, let's say, Lynn Benton, you know, very close in size, their property tax is only 10 million and their state portion is 24 million. So, you know, 70% of our allocation is coming from property tax, which means, you know, state cuts per biennium impact our college less because of our robust support from property tax. So that sounds like there's a lot of opinions on that. And a group working on it just to make it more equitable.
It's going to be fascinating. They're also working on it because there's a desire to incentivize certain things. There's a desire to incentivize, what is it? We don't need to get into it too much, but a certain kind of developmental math model that they really want us to use. They're desirous of incentivizing community colleges who do a lot of CTE because their equipment expenses are so much more. So it'll be, Alicia's got her pads on because it could get interesting. So she can defend herself.
Any questions on those slides? So just to kind of summarize some of our key revenue assumptions, you know, the 9.4 just kind of went over the calculation there. We're assuming a 5.6 growth, you know, property tax growth amount. The next section goes over our proposed tuition and fees. We discussed the you know, expected decline in enrollment. How we're using that as kind of a realistic expectation. And then our transfers in this year, we kind of marked about 4.8 million. I should note 2.5 is related to the HERF funds. Our budgeted expenditure increases are fairly stable year over year.
Go back. I'm curious. So the amount that's coming in for the HERF funds, like quick calculation, that's 4% roughly of the budget.
So
or maybe a little more. Anyway, are we expecting that to continue? I guess I'm always concerned about sort of using one-off funding, or in this case, maybe 2 off or even 3 off, but significant amounts of funding that go away. And I'm curious what smoothing effects or smoothing assumptions you guys are having to take care of that.
Yeah, certainly a concern. You know, I wish we had that funding, you know, we could rely on that funding for several more years. You know, we can recognize lost revenue based on the HERF guidance. And how we calculated that was looking at some of the areas that had, our residence hall, which had no students in it a year ago. We used some of the funds as lost revenue, used some of the HER funds to recognize revenue there. As well as.
So your point is that will be act as backfilling for the HER funds that goes away.
Oh, yeah, I mean, we plan to have, full residence hall. So there are some things that are certainly coming back. I I wish we could, I wish we could get, $4 million a year from the federal government, but we can't rely on that. So, I mean, there are areas that will, recover for the college, and we can use some of that as our general fund revenue.
I'll add, and this is kind of repetitive of what you said. Much of the HERF money could only be specifically dedicated toward some very specific things.
Gotcha.
And so a lot of that money really is a one-time,
Right.
A significant number, not all of it, but it's a one-time expenditure like PPE,
Right.
Plastic barriers.
And it's not something that would have been in our budget without COVID. So, okay. Gotcha.
Yep.
Why does your 2024-25 state aid go down?
Just based on what we know of the biennium estimates that we've seen from the state.
Okay.
And they haven't allocated it yet.
Yeah.
So
I understand, but I mean,
yeah.
21 to 22 went up, 22 to 23 went up, 23 to 24 is going down. I'm just curious. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to some of our key expenditure assumptions. I mentioned they're pretty stable year over year. The 21-22 column does not reflect the increased classified wages that were mentioned already, just because that was not part of last year's budget. But really a significant investment this year. So this slide represents our forecast for next year. So revenue is based on assumptions kind of that we just reviewed. Our listed expenditures incorporate historical trends for spending and position vacancies. And using these assumptions, we're projecting fiscal 23 operating surplus of $655,000. And our ending balance will be above the required 10% for reserve. Any questions on the forecast? This slide represents our proposed budget by function and object class for fiscal 22. The appropriation is voted on during the June board meeting. And I just want to mention that I'm happy to meet with board members or budget committee members to go over additional details on how these are calculated, and as well as any increases. All right, this is just a visual of where our general fund expenditures are from year over year by object class. Pretty consistent, and it kind of highlights the significant investment that we have in salaries and benefits.
Is payroll assessments a euphemism for benefits?
Yeah, so fringe and insurance.
It also
Includes
includes
PERS, yes.
I saw that. 35% in a couple of years.
So the final piece for the general fund budget is I wanted to cover our HER funds, higher education emergency relief funds. This is just kind of a high level summary of how much was awarded by award, CARES, CRISA, and ARP. And just kind of where we've spent some of the money. The total was around 21 million, like Rory mentioned. Approximately 9.4 went directly to students. And actually, a lot of the spring term students are receiving their awards today, which is great. We're using about 8 million to cover lost revenue. We made significant investments in training and technology. Used a lot of the funding for COVID safety, including masks, testing, vaccine tracking software, as well as invested in faculty stipends to develop classes for online learning, and many of those classes will continue. And so our remaining funds for fiscal 23, we're using approximately $3 million worth of HER funds. 2.5 will be lost revenue, and it'll also cover some additional expenditures. All right, so this was our summary of guiding principles as we develop the budget. Did you want to make remarks on this, Lori, or?
Yeah, a few, and then I'd ask my team to chime in as well. Obviously, one of our guiding principles is maintaining our disciplined approach and maintaining accessibility and affordability. We were also very strategic in our use of HERF funds. And I really thank Kathleen and other grant funds for their work in utilizing them in the wisest manner we could. I think it's also, it's important to note, I don't know if this was a guiding principle, but it is important to note that we are experiencing a decrease in staffing at the college. Now, some of that is that the fact that the Great Resignation has come to COCC. During COVID, we've had folks leave for lots of reasons, retire earlier than planned, fulfill a dream to live in Montana. And some of them have left for higher paying jobs, quite frankly. We've had that happen, hence our wage study. But when it really isn't a trend, as Laura Bomey looked into this more closely, it really isn't just a trend over the past couple of years. In 2016-17, we had 665 employees, full-time, faculty, staff, administration. That doesn't count temporary workers or irregular wage workers. In 2021-22, we have 580. That is not all due to COVID. And so one of the discoveries I think we've made, we've always been a little bit concerned about the fact as enrollment goes down, do we need the same level of staffing? And, you know, accreditation requirements change, what students expect changes. So there's no direct correlation in my experience between a decline in enrollment and a decline in staff. But given how significant our enrollment decline has been, I think this is noteworthy that we've been pretty prudent, frankly, as we look at open positions, as we decide what it is that we want to do. And so that gave us some, you know, this decrease gave us, I think, some flexibility in formulating the budget for next year. And then I mentioned maintaining needed investments, classified wages. This year, as a result of an MOU and a wage study, which Laura Bomey was the key factor in making sure that that happened and happened well, and lots of hours. So big kudos to Laura. We discovered in that classified wage study that on average, our classified wages were 11% below benchmark. That's not every position. Some were 3, some were 16. All of them were below, but on average 11. And so we had agreed with the classified association that we would look at that. And again, back to the #1 budget priority, we would address that to the fullest extent that we felt was prudent. And we did address that. We increased wages on average for classified 7%. That doesn't mean everybody got 7, some got less, some got more. The total for that investment is approximately $450,000. So it's a significant investment that we obviously commit to in the future and believe we can maintain. Then in facilities, I think more of this will be a focus when we get to non-general funds, but we are dedicating $1.2 million to deferred maintenance, in particular, HVAC systems and electrical systems. And we'll be using general fund dollars as well. So we're juggling a lot of balls, keeping a lot of balls in the air. Kathleen or my team, would you like to add anything? Technology investment,
Yeah,
Laura?
so we did do a number of things related to, I think it was mentioned a little bit earlier by Kathleen, that we invested in. You can see it. I'd like to just take a minute. Oh, shoot, he walked out. I'm gonna do it again when he walks back. The great work that our AV engineer and Jeff Floyd have done, and Brian Allison and their team for the streaming classrooms, but also this room to allow much more seamless remote interactions for folks, but we've had quite an investment in streaming classrooms across all of our campuses. And then we've also done some investments for e-learning, both in staffing and trying to make sure that we have other systems, laptops. We've mentioned this maybe before in some of our board meetings, but hotspots for our students, laptop checkouts through the library, and kudos to the library personnel for helping facilitate that. And so and then also one very big one, which is cybersecurity, trying to shore up our systems as things, people that I guess were at home during COVID had a lot more time to figure out how to hack systems and have become even more sophisticated. So doing all of that work and trying to stay ahead of whatever the next new thing is that we need to do. So those are the investments that some of, that kept in mind, some of the things that CAREF allowed us to do. And it's a never ending. There's never enough really to, we could do a lot more for our students. We're hoping to do that. And also to just make our ability to serve our students more integrated with everything we do.
Yeah, I would just add that grant funding has been a key part of our strategy the last year, laid out by the leadership team in Lori, and we have an excellent person in that role, Sean Tevlin, but just really being targeted with our grant approach. Diverse revenue streams help in resource scarcity, and so looking to state, federal, and even private foundation grants to augment some of these services. It's been really great. We've had a very successful year, and we'll report on that a little more formally at the June or July meeting.
And something for next year, frankly, we're a little more tuned in with the federal earmark process and put in a request with our senators, our Oregon senators, that Sean Tevlin really shepherded beautifully for about $200,000 in equipment, which would serve our medical programs in Madras. We haven't gotten it yet, but I think we've become much more aggressive than we have been in the past about alternate funding sources. Kathleen, do you want to
his name, but I'd like to say Scott Burge. I think I said AV engineer, but Scott Burge was instrumental in a lot of the work that was across our campuses.
Yeah, and I will only add, fairly new to this process at COCC. So thank you to the people in the room, as well as Betsy Julian, and answering my questions. I really feel like it was a very collaborative effort.
It was, and I will note again next time. Kathleen, as we know, stepped into some big shoes, and she has done an excellent job. I couldn't be more pleased, Kathleen, with the work that you've done.
Yeah.
Let's give you a round of applause.
Mentioned I'm available for much more detailed conversations over the phone or on Zoom if board members or budget committee members have those questions. All right.
Were there any questions?
Okay, so I think anything else, Roger, you can adjourn the budget meeting till our next one, which is.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved, yep.
Second.
We're adjourned, yes, thank you.
You are very welcome to stay.
Yeah, you can just sit right there, you don't have to go.
Okay.
So the budget committee, you're welcome to stay. It is pretty exciting, I'm telling you. But you also should not feel obligated.
We don't need to take a break, keep moving.
You don't need to.
So we finished with the budget committee. We'll adjourn back into open session. We'll look at the consent agenda made of the minutes of the March 9th, 22 board meeting. Any changes to that? Do I have a motion to approve?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hand. Yep. Those opposed, those abstaining, we've passed the consent agenda. We'll go on to informational items. The financial statements, anybody have any questions about them? The new hire reports, any questions about those? Real estate committee update, I'm looking to Joe or Erica or Jim, who are on the committee. Joe, you got your microphone off.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you're coming like God out of the ceiling.
Joe, do you want me to do this, since I think the main update, or one of the main updates, is the Aubrey Butte property?
Yes, Laura, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So the real estate committee got direction at the last meeting from the board to proceed with steps to sell the property on Aubrey Butte. And after consulting with Charlotte and Paul Taylor, we concluded that in an abundance of caution, we should do an RFP process to identify a broker to represent the college. So Charlotte prepared that, and we all reviewed it and approved it, and it went out, and we received one responsive, one response to the RFP, and it was satisfactory. It was from Fratsky Commercial. And so I don't know if Dr. Chesley has signed it yet, but I think we're proceeding that way. As you guys may recall, Brian Fratsky is the person who did the opinion of value for us a little while back. So, you know, it's convenient that he ended up being the responsive bidder. And so he will commence marketing of the property now. And I think that's the gist of that. I think there's a WISPy update, but obviously because I recused myself from that, I'm not a part of that.
So who wants to take on the WISPy?
So this is Joe. We had our real estate meeting yesterday with WISPy, and everything's flying along just right, very well. As our president mentioned, we've already received a little over $500,000 in regards to the sale of current properties, and that will continue to grow through almost September. Will be a complete buyout probably. We do have one item. There is a right-of-way dedication. I'm not too sure. Do we have pictures of that, or do we need? Does the rest of the board have the pictures of a right-of-way dedication that we need to approve?
Joe, it's the next agenda item.
Okay, so we'll wait for that then.
Okay, well, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Laura, for the update. So we'll go to the next agenda item, the Neighborly Ventures frontage proposal.
Alan, because this does involve William Smith Properties and my firm does work for them, I, as has been my practice, am going to recuse myself from this discussion. And I'm hoping someone could please text me, maybe Erica, when we're back. Thank you.
Okay. So Joe.
So I would probably default to or release Paul.
Okay.
On this.
That'd be
great.
Nope, happy to do it. So this frontage dedication has been requested by Neighborly Ventures in connection with their ground lease that they are building the multifamily housing on. And they've recently received their conditions of approval for their project. And as with essentially all conditions of approval, or all development approvals, it came with conditions, one of which is that the college dedicate 20 feet of additional right-of-way along Shevlin Park Road. And that's to allow it to become someday the full 100-foot width that is required for that type of street. And if you look at the third page of that agenda item 11A.1, you'll see that it's essentially a 600-foot long, 20-foot wide strip along the frontage road between, as Chevelin Park Road heads toward Mount Washington Drive. And so without that dedication, the Neighborly Ventures project can't move forward. And so they've requested that that the college dedicate that frontage area.
Okay, any
From the
questions?
real estate,
Go
from
ahead,
the
Joe.
real estate, from the real estate committee, we
We're in there.
have no qualms regards to this request. It's a no-brainer, and I would recommend that we approve this dedication.
Any other questions from the board? I concur with you, Joe. I think this is a no-brainer. I think we should just move forward, and I'm looking for a motion.
So I made the motion to approve this dedication of this right away.
Okay.
There's actually a motion in the packet because you also have to find the property is not needed for the college's use in order to transfer it to somebody else.
Okay, so I'll amend Joe's motion to the proposed resolution in the packet. You'll amend your
I'll
second.
second that.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? So we've unanimously passed the resolution dedicating the right of way. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for the assistance.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
I know this is kind of crazy, but we're doing it, so it's great. Okay, we'll move on to tuition and fees proposal.
Kathleen has given a summary earlier as per the budget. Kathleen, would you or Alicia like to add anything?
I would say that some people are always hesitant around tuition increases, but what this does for us is enable us to continue to offer the services we do, the high quality faculty and staff that we have, so that we can best support our students. And so when I'm wearing my vice president students hat on, this does not give me reservations like you might expect me to express. So in fact, I think this does more for our students than if we were to do anything less.
So a little bit more tuition cost gives a quality education and can keep our standards up.
Absolutely.
Great. Does the board need any other discussion or have any questions on the tuition and fee increase? No. So I'm looking for a motion to support this tuition increase for 22-23. Oliver?
Sure, I'll move.
So Oliver moves support. Is there a second?
I will second.
Bruce seconds. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? So we've approved the tuition increase. And thank you, everybody. I know tuition increases are hard. We have empathy for our students. But like Alicia said, you know, if we do incremental, and Laura said to Lori, if we do incremental small increases, people can adjust to those and we can keep our level of education at the high standard level we have today. So we'll move on to general policies of the board, a revision, first reading of general policy number 10. I'll look to Oliver. Can you talk about that?
Sure. So
We need Laura back.
She's on there.
Oh, she is? Okay.
Yeah, I got this
There she
right
is.
here and
Okay.
I see her, so.
Sorry.
I think she's off screen. Normally when she comes
Oh.
back, she turns her camera back on.
Oh, right.
text her and let her know that.
I failed.
Well, okay. We want to know what she thought of tuition and fees, I bet.
Yeah, we should probably, I failed.
Okay.
I had one job and I couldn't do it.
Because her image is, her name is there because she's technically logged in, but she walks away and mutes. So
Oh,
she can-
okay.
yeah,
I thought she logged off, but that's what confused me.
Yeah, it's confusing.
It's like when she said she was leaving, literally she disappeared from the screen, so I just assumed she had logged off.
So should we just stop and wait till Laura gets back on?
Yeah, I've texted her.
Okay,
Do we need to re-vote on tuition? and fees?
we'll ask her.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Laura. Sam, we're sorry, but while you were gone, we thought you were there. We voted for the tuition and fee increase. And we all approved it, but if you have reservations and questions, we can revisit that.
I don't have reservations, but I'd like to vote on it.
All right, all those in favor of the tuition and fee increase, raise your hand and vote yes.
Yes.
All those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, we're unanimously approved the fee increase, and thank you very much, Laura. And it's incremental small changes keep our level of education at the high level we have it today. Now we're into the general board policy GP10, and Oliver is going to talk about the proposed revision.
Sure. So in our policy review committee, the members identified that governance policy 10 had not been revised since 1994. And that was reflected in some of the language, like the use of the word handicap, which in the decade since this was looked at, is not really considered appropriate. So we took that as an opportunity to sort of broaden this and really make it into what it should be, which is a policy on policy. And so we identified opportunities to give some further guidance on how our policy is made at the board level. And we also wanted to provide some guiding principles to the board on how that policy made and what we want it to look like. So you'll notice that this is significantly more robust than the previous policy or the current policy. And we also felt it was important to highlight we would like policy going forward to reflect our commitment to being an inclusive, diverse, equitable, and accessible college community. Beyond that, this more or less reflects what we currently do, but just sort of codifies that into a formal process going forward.
So this committee is Laura and Erica with Oliver. Do you two have anything to add? Thank you for the good work that you're doing, Oliver.
The only other thing I would add is that these discussions, we had several discussions around this policy, and I included President Chesley and Alicia and Christy Walker. So this was a broader conversation than just the three of us, because it has impact not only for the board, but for the entire college community. And we wanted to be intentional about bringing in Christie's voice because we really wanted to elevate that the work that the college is doing around inclusion, diversity, and equity and into a forward level policy.
So I'm hearing you say that the board policy reflects the college policy.
What we're saying is that we appreciate the work that the college is doing, and we want to make sure that that's reflected in the work that we are doing, and that is embedded within a board level policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time, Christy, Alicia, and Lori to have us work through policies and give input. We want to make sure we're aligned, and then they've had some really good insight too. So
really good. And Alan, I think to your question, what it was important to us to have that perspective and also to make sure that we're consistent with college policies.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board?
Oh, and they're doing this on their lunch breaks sometimes. So they
eat their sandwiches while they're talking.
We owe them something at some point. I don't know, a beverage or something.
Okay, so this is first reading. We will take up second reading and vote at our next meeting. And in between, if there are things that we need to consider we haven't, then we can take those up then. Okay, let's move on to old business, the board rebalancing proposal.
This is the proposal that Ethan Sharigan from the Population Center at Portland State presented last month. during that presentation last month, he had made some changes as requested by the board. So this is a proposal to accept the rebalancing borders that we discussed last month that were proposed.
Are the board members okay with your new boundaries?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see anybody who's not. Me, mine is so small I can hardly see it, but okay. So this is an X, it's an action item, so we accept this. Is that what we do? A motion to
I move
accept?
to accept the revised board member zones as reflected in the attached maps.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, more discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. Any objections? We've unanimously approved the change in our board zone boundaries. Next, we'll go on to the City of Bend property tax proposal. This was something we had in a presentation in our last board meeting. I'll look to Bruce to maybe reflect on it and start the discussion.
Again, it's not, thank you. Let me gather my thoughts here. So again, we'll recall that this was a presentation that Lynn McConnell gave to us, a number of items that the city was proposing. At that time, she talked about 3 of them, and they have since decided not to move forward on the middle income tax exemption. But the first 2, essentially the nonprofit property tax exemption and the multiple unit property tax exemption, these are ways that from in essence the college giving up its property tax assessment, we can help the much larger community effort to try to build affordable housing and keep Bend as accessible to all as possible. Obviously, there are trade-offs here. And I think there was some question as to whether this was something we wanted to even have a discussion as a full council. I thought it was. You may recall in some of our past board retreat meetings, there have been conversations on other topics that may initially appear to be a little bit outside the range or outside the realm of what is typically thought of as the responsibility of a community college. But there's always the language about the extent to which we are responsive to the community, responsive to community needs. Childcare comes to mind in my perspective. Affordable housing would be something similar to that. And so I wanted to have kind of a brief discussion as to see how other board members feel, whether this is something that is there a majority on the board to support this. I think what they're looking for, Lori, is a letter or something if we support it, or it's wasn't quite clear to me what they were looking for.
They're very open to what that might look like. The board could send a letter of support. The board may choose not to say anything, or the board could send any kind of feedback it wanted.
And again, I think when Alan and I and Lori had a chance to talk about this, we actually have some draft language that might take the form of a letter. But I wanted to be really clear that we thought that was perhaps premature. Certainly, if it doesn't have the will of the full board. So I think this is kind of an open discussion as to where people come down philosophically.
This is Joe. I'll pick you up on that, Bruce. Thank you very much. This can take us into a slippery slope going forward. There's 5 other communities having the same issues. If all those 5 communities come to COCC, the question is how much will it impact us and for how long? Hopefully there's a sunset to this. Probably not. Usually when these things are implemented, they never go away like any urban renewal districts, they seem to go forever. I know that you've been around it a long time as well as Alan, and I'm sure 2 or 3 other board members are familiar with how all this works. After a while, it does affect special districts as well as community colleges.
So you're concerned from the setting of a precedent, and whether it may be, while it may be appropriate in Bend, there are definitely reservations about how it might perhaps more adversely affect some of the other communities.
Well, it probably won't. It probably won't affect Madras as much because of the minimal amount of dollars that's affecting us relative to the whole budget to COCC. But when you have other communities having the same challenges and they come to COCC and request the same thing, after a while, 10 $100 bills is a lot of money. If it's 10 $1,000 bills, it's real quick. So in the whole scheme of things, it doesn't hurt us that much, but it can if we continue to get these requests for different exemptions and urban renewal district type projects like this.
I agree with you, Joe. But I'm thinking, here's a couple thoughts. One is there's a sunset on the multifamily. It's enforced as long as they have their state approval or something, like, I'm not exactly sure, but when I read it, it sounded like, okay, as long as you're qualified for Section 8 housing, we'll give you an exemption. When you quit being qualified, you lose that exemption. So in terms of large properties like multifamily units, there is a finality to it if the property ceases to be used in the manner that it got approval for. We could take these up one community at a time, and we could see what the benefit and the challenges are for the city of Bend. And we could take that and say, well, we supported it, but yet here's the challenge, and we think you need to come up with a different solution, Redmond, if they were to bring it up.
Laura?
Thank you. So my thoughts are a little more complicated, and that is, in general, I am in favor to the extent that it's not a huge impact on the college. And so for me, it would depend upon the specific plan, and Lynn laid out a number of different potential things, right? So I would want to consider them individually. So, and let me give you an example of what my thinking is. Just a complete tax abatement on a particular big property, particularly one that's already developed, because we want to, turn it in, for instance, to affordable housing. I'm not going to be in favor of that. But when it's incremental financing, and so it's just the difference between we're already at the baseline undeveloped, and now it's going to be developed, and we won't get taxes during, some compliance period of 10 years or 20 years. I'm okay with that, because I view those as projects that wouldn't happen but for the tax abatement or the tax credit, and therefore, I don't feel like we're losing as much. So to me, it depends on individual situations and what the specific facts are and what the length of time is. So I'm supportive. I think affordable housing, as you may know, is one of my passions, and I want to be supportive of it. I think it's important. I think it's important for healthy communities, just like community colleges are. And I think that affordable housing is really important to the people that we serve. I mean, many of our students as well as honestly, our employees, right? It's getting harder and harder to be able to have even a job as a college professor and afford housing in Bend. So, I'm in favor of it in general terms, but I think I want to look at them individually as proposals.
I'll go ahead and weigh in. I mean, from my perspective, obviously affordable housing is something that I've been very involved with for many, many years. And where I come from is that I think the best approach for a community is if you can get a wide very diverse range of stakeholders involved, private, public, nonprofit, et cetera. And so everybody sees that, oh, lots of people are contributing to try to address the problem. And I see that, you know, COCC has assets and has mechanisms. And from my perspective, I think there's understandably reservation about donating land for affordable housing. And it seems to me if we're not willing to do that, this is a way that we can say we are and want to be part of the solution for affordable housing in Bend. And I concur, Joe, I hear where you're coming from, but I think these can be looked at on a community by community basis. And I think this would be a really important step for us to make here in Bend. So I would certainly be supportive of these, but I'm curious how other people feel. Do you want to weigh in, Oliver? Or?
I am fully supportive of this. I have no reservations about it. I am curious, going back to our budget conversation, does if we see we're not collecting this in property tax, then do we see that reflected in the formula in terms of state support? So are we really giving up that much by allowing us to, like, does the good that we do outweigh any possible loss that the college may?
So we didn't, I mean, it's pretty hard to figure what lost revenue would be. There would be some lost revenue. In my view, it's not terribly significant. And in my view, this would be a gesture which would show our community our support and would be something we could do that makes a lot more sense than say donating land. That is just my view.
And Bruce, I'm curious if you can elaborate any more on the decision not to postpone the middle income tax exemption.
I cannot, because it was a city decision.
I don't know if you have any more insight.
No.
What cities don't collect income tax, the state does, and so I don't know what the city thought they had.
No, it was, they were gonna postpone pursuing a middle income tax exemption. They decided not to pursue.
Income tax, but like housing for the missing middle as opposed to the lower.
I mean, it just looks to me like they decided to prioritize a lower income threshold. I don't know.
So I feel like that would have been helpful to our instructors, professors, et cetera, that we're trying to recruit. That's the housing that college needs the most especially.
Erica or Jim?
As I stated before, I don't have to go after the middle income tax exemption because it's gone. So that's good from my point of view. I'm in favor of property tax exemptions for nonprofit organizations that are building affordable housing projects. I have a philosophical problem with the regular apartment house private developer getting another subsidy in the form of property taxes. But basically, I don't see too much reason to wring our hands too much over this because they will go ahead irrespective of what we think, or they'll not go ahead irrespective of what we think. In other words, we're such a small taxing district compared to the other ones that our vote doesn't count. As for, I mean, it may, you know, they may care what we think, but in practice, it doesn't make any difference one way or the other as far as they're voting on the city council to do this or not do this. So once again, I'm in favor of the nonprofit housing projects getting a property tax exemption, not in favor of the apartment house property tax exemptions. And I would like to see exactly what program they are proposing like Laura pointed out, before I would vote on, a specific endorsement of a specific program.
Thank you.
Erica.
I'm generally in favor, but I would also like to see the specifics.
Okay,
Joe's got his hand up.
Joe.
Thank you. I hope I didn't come across that I'm not in favor of this. It's just a matter of just the caution, as well as, it's an economic partnership for the effort of affordable housing. We can talk about economic development. We can talk about economic enhancement. This is an economic stability as well as a step up in regards to making things happen. I go on the premise that the reason government exists is you can't find it in the yellow pages or on Google. This is something that we can do that no one else can. That's what the purpose of government is in most cases.
Well, I tell you, I mean, I don't know if we want to take a formal vote. It sounds to me like there is a majority of the board that is generally supportive of this. I think there are some reservations, and I think probably more support for the nonprofit property tax exemption than the MUFTI. Are you guys okay if Alan and I draft something? It's not going to be a robust letter. It's not like this was a top priority for the board, but I think it is important. When people ask us, well, what did you guys do for affordable housing? I think it's important for us to go on record that we were supportive in this effort. But having said that, both Jim's concerns, Laura's concerns, and we'll come up with something that I think will be amenable. Are people okay if Alan and I work on that, perhaps with Mark?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for the good discussion, everybody. Let's move on to board member activities. I had 2 college affair meetings this last month. The other meetings, I was just out of town. So with that, Bruce.
Had sort of not quite as many calls with Lori because she was so efficient with her her keeping us informed and everything. But one activity I did do, which I thought was just awesome, on March 30th, COCC participated in really a global teach-in around climate and climate justice, and it was held at Willie Hall, and it was just great. I think we heard there are about 400 of these events happening around the world, and for us to be part of that and to hear presentations predominantly from COCC faculty. There was one outside person from the Environmental Center, and just different perspectives from a biologist, from a chemist, from a public health person, from a psychologist, and just seeing how much the college has really, I think, embraced this idea that we need to be taking more action around what's happening, in our environment, around climate change. And I was really struck. I'm not going to remember the 4 C's, but there were four kind of concepts, principles that were overarching, and one of them that kept coming back was community. And it really was wonderful for me being in the audience and hearing how the different faculty members, even though they hadn't necessarily coordinated their presentations, it blended seamlessly as a community. And I just really wanted to give kudos to Noel Copley and Owen Murphy, getting the name of the student, and Dana Christensen. Yeah, and again, just everyone who was a part of that. They followed up on Owen's just fabulous presentation a couple meetings ago, and I think Noel has it was recorded, so I really want to recommend everybody take a little while to listen to that. That's all.
Oliver.
Well, we had a meeting of the policy review committee, which resulted in the policy revision that we reviewed tonight. And then President Chesley was kind enough to meet with me and the executive director of the Central Oregon Disability Support Network to discuss colleges' disability services.
Erica.
Had a policy review committee meeting. And then I also got to take part in the tour of the Health Career Center with Kate Brown on the 15th of March, which was amazing. And I don't remember anything this week. The student, what was her name? Who? Oh, I'm trying to look it up in my emails.
Dental assistant.
Yes, she was amazing.
She was amazing. She's in dental assisting and I can't remember her name. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna look at, okay, anyway, wait. Okay, I don't remember. I'm sorry, but she was amazing. She did an awesome job and it was great to show off the facilities, and Kate Brown was very engaged and asked lots of questions, and it was great to be part of that. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of that. And that's it.
Well, thanks. We're proud of her. Laura.
I had, let's see, the policy review committee on the 11th of March. I had the real estate committee yesterday. I had the president's contract committee, which is Alan and me, and we met with Lori on the 8th of April. And then I did work with Charla and Lori and Paul on the RFP for the sale of the Aubrey property.
Thank you. Joe.
I did participate with I went through the meet and greet with our DPI candidate, as well as a one-on-one conversation with President Chesley after that. And the real estate committee meeting we had yesterday in regards to the WISB, as well as the update on real estate items. And that's it.
Jim.
I also attended the real estate committee meeting yesterday, and on March 11th, I sat in on a meeting of the sustainability committee that the college has, because after Owen Murphy's presentation to the board, I was enthused about learning more about what they were doing. Turns out they are a very effective and well-organized group. Among other things, they're working on a sustainability scholarship for students, and they've gotten it quite funded already and looking to fund it some more and involve more students in sustainability kind of focus. I also attended remotely the teach-in on March 30th, and would add to what Bruce said. I thought it was an outstanding event. I couldn't tell how many people were there, but probably a lot of people did attend remotely also. A lot of good presentations from various faculty members and others. And I would call out one in particular by Venus Nguyen, who is a faculty member in the art department. And I guess I was particularly struck by it because the climate change in the past issue has been advanced by people like me, who say things like, oh boy, we better watch out. The world average temperature is going to go up by 1.6 degrees Celsius. And so everyone says, yeah, thanks, bye. And then nothing happens. As Greta Thunberg says, it's all blah, blah, blah at this point. And so how do you break through that was the point of Venus Nguyen's presentation, which she called Provoking Change Visually, and how you can really impact social change movements by communicating with people in a different way. And I thought it was really clever, the kind of examples that she cooked up. She also wants to thank the board and the administration for approving her graphics design certificate program, which I think sounded to me like a really good addition when we heard the presentation at the board to the kind of career opportunities that people attending COCC might like. And that's it.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I guess I did more things than I said I did, so good. Well, good. I'm impressed with all the board being engaged with college. I think that's a good thing. Next, we'll go on to the president's report. Continue.
I have the student's name. Her name is Effie, Estefania Quintana. She's amazing. Just wanted to give her like full name. I can't get over how, well, one, her excitement for what she was doing, and then how she presented herself and presented COCC. So I just want to give her full recognition. Okay, thank you.
I'll be mercifully brief. I just want to note, we had a really interesting visit today. Ji Hang Lee is the executive director of the Association of Community College Trustees. You're our professional organization at the national level, and he is here for the OCCA conference. And he reached out to chat with me and the executive team today to just hear about issues that we're facing as a college looking forward. And we had a great conversation, very enjoyable. He's a lovely man, and I'm really glad that he took the time to come visit us. We showed him the Science Center, pretty impressive. And I will just note that I hope to see everybody tomorrow night in Prineville at 5:30 for our 10th anniversary celebration. And that's my report.
Thank you. And as we move forward, dates to consider for the board are Wednesday, May 8th, May 11th is the Board of Directors meeting for May, and June 18th is the Board of Directors meeting in June. And as Lori said, the OCCA conference is at Sun River right now. And they will be having events all day tomorrow and the morning of Friday morning. And the All-American academic team will be highlighted on Friday. So if anybody wants to go, just go. Yeah.
I neglected something very important. I know that you've all heard this before, but I want to publicly note that tomorrow night at the OCCA conference awards dinner, Alicia Moore, our Vice President for Student Affairs, is being given the Cam Preuss Award for Outstanding Service to Community Colleges. And I'm just really delighted, no one more deserving. And so I wanted to make sure that got on the record.
Okay, with that, we're going to adjourn to an executive session. And we're going to talk about performance of the president. And then when we adjourn from that, we're just going to come back into personal session and adjourn the board meeting. We don't need to come back on YouTube because we won't be making any decisions. This is informational only. Does that work, Mark? Works for us.
Technically, you should go back, even if no one's gonna hang around. You probably should be, well, I guess no, because we're here, so we're not really, this is the public meeting, yeah, you're fine.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I'm still in